My boss fired me on a Friday afternoon in front of the entire office. He had security walk me out of the building. He sent an email to our industry contacts that same evening saying I had been let go for performance and integrity concerns. 3 months later, his company was under federal investigation. 6 months after that, he was gone. And it all started with one document I saved on my last day. My name is Nathan Cole. I spent 7 years at Harwick Consulting, a mid-size financial advisory firm that managed portfolios for institutional clients. I was a senior analyst. I was good at my job. I knew it, and my clients knew it. My boss's name was Greg Harwick, second generation. His father had built the firm. Greg had inherited it, expanded it, and somewhere along the way decided that the rules were suggestions. I didn't know that yet. Not fully. I had suspicions, small ones, the kind you file away and don't examine too closely because you need the job, and the money is good, and you tell yourself you're probably misreading things. But I was starting to look closer. I think Greg knew that, which is why he moved first. It was a Friday, 3 in the afternoon. He called me into the conference room, and there were 2 people I didn't recognize sitting at the table. HR and legal, I found out later. Greg didn't sit down. He stood at the head of the table and told me my position was being eliminated, effective immediately. Performance concerns, a pattern of behavior inconsistent with company values. I asked, what behavior? He looked at me and said, I think you know. I didn't know. Or rather, I knew that he knew that I had been looking at things I wasn't supposed to find. That was the behavior. That was the pattern. I kept my face completely still. They handed me a box. My personal items, already packed. Someone had gone to my desk before this meeting. A security guard waited by the door. I took the box. I walked to my desk to confirm it was all there. And while I was standing there, checking items against what I remembered keeping at work, I did one thing. I forwarded one email to my personal account. Just one. 40 seconds. The security guard was watching, but not closely. I had been composing that forward in my head for 3 weeks, waiting for the moment I'd need it. Then I picked up the box and walked out. Greg watched me go from the conference room doorway. I didn't look at him. That evening, his email went out to our industry network. Performance concerns, integrity issues, the kind of language that's carefully crafted to be impossible to disprove. Vague enough to avoid defamation, but specific enough to damage. My phone went quiet over the weekend. People in the industry who had been warm suddenly weren't returning calls. That's how that kind of email works. You don't have to prove anything. You just have to plant doubt. I sat with that for about 48 hours. Then I opened the email I had forwarded to myself. Let me explain what it was. 3 weeks before I was fired, I had been asked to run a reconciliation on one of our largest institutional accounts, a pension fund that had been with Harwick for 11 years. Routine quarterly work. But the numbers didn't reconcile. Not by a little, by a significant amount that kept resolving differently each time I ran it. I flagged it internally, sent a note to Greg. His response was fast, faster than usual. He told me there had been a system migration, that the discrepancy was a data artifact, that IT was handling it, and that I should close out the reconciliation and move on. I moved on, but I kept the email chain. That was the document I forwarded on my last day. It wasn't proof of anything on its own. It was a thread, one end of a thread. But I had 7 years of context and a very clear memory of what those numbers had looked like before the migration Greg mentioned. Because I had been running that account for 4 years, and I knew its patterns the way you know a road you drive every day. Something was wrong, and now I had both motive and time. I spent the first 2 weeks doing what you're supposed to do, updating my resume, reaching out to contacts, applying for roles, keeping the professional machine moving. But every evening, after the job search work was done, I sat at my kitchen table and I pulled on the thread. I was careful. I only used information I had legitimately possessed. The forwarded email, my own notes from client meetings, which I had always kept in a personal file as a professional habit. Public filings. Pension funds of a certain size have regulatory disclosure requirements. I knew where to look. By the end of the first week, I had found 3 discrepancies in public filings that didn't match the internal numbers I remembered. By the end of the second week, I had a theory. By the end of the third week, I had something closer to a map. The scheme, and I want to be careful here because I am not an attorney and I was not the one who ultimately proved this, appeared to involve the systematic misrepresentation of fees. Small percentages applied across large balances over long periods of time. The kind of thing that's invisible in any single quarter, but accumulates to a significant number over years. Across multiple institutional accounts, across 11 years, the number I was estimating was substantial enough that I stopped estimating and started writing things down very carefully. Then, on a Tuesday in the 4th week, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. The voice on the other end was a woman. She said her name was Diana. She said she worked in compliance at Harwick. She said she had heard what happened to me, and then she said, "I think you found the same thing I found." I was quiet for a moment. "How did you get this number?" I asked. "You forwarded that email to your personal account," she said. "I know because I was copied on the original thread. And I've been watching what Greg does to people who look too closely." We met in person 2 days later. Coffee shop, neutral ground, neither of us carrying anything. Diana had been at Harwick for 4 years. Compliance officer, the person whose job it was to catch exactly this kind of thing. She had flagged irregularities 8 months ago through internal channels. Her report had been buried. She had been quietly sidelined since then, moved to a reduced role, waiting to see what would happen next. She had documentation I didn't have. I had context she didn't have. Together, we had something that neither of us had alone. We spent 3 weeks building the file, carefully, methodically, only using what we had legitimately accessed. Diana had a cousin who was an attorney specializing in financial fraud. He reviewed everything we put together and told us 2 things. What we had was credible, and we needed to go to the right place with it. The right place was the SEC. We filed a formal whistleblower complaint on a Thursday morning. Diana's attorney submitted it. My attorney, someone I had hired by then, was copied. Then we waited. Here's what people don't tell you about this part. The waiting is its own kind of discipline. You've done everything you can do. The machine is now moving on its own schedule, not yours. You go back to your life. You apply for jobs. You have dinner. You sleep, or try to. And you wait. 6 weeks after we filed, I got a call from my attorney. The SEC had opened a formal investigation. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. An investigation is not a conclusion. I had been in finance long enough to know that these things move slowly and sometimes don't move at all. But 3 weeks after that, something happened that changed the pace entirely. A second whistleblower came forward independently. Someone I had never met, never contacted. A former portfolio manager who had left Harwick 2 years earlier and had been sitting on his own documentation, waiting for a sign that someone else was looking. When two independent sources produce overlapping evidence, investigations accelerate. They accelerated. I won't walk you through every step of what followed because some of it is still ongoing, and my attorney has advised me on what I can and cannot say publicly. What I can tell you is this. Greg Harwick was removed from the firm within 4 months of our filing. The board, which had its own exposure questions to answer, moved quickly once the investigation became known. A receiver was appointed to manage the affected accounts. The pension fund clients were notified. The industry email he had sent about me, the one about performance concerns and integrity issues, became, in a quiet and satisfying way, a document in the investigation file. Evidence of what he had known and when he had known it. I never sent a reply to that email. Never defended myself publicly. Never posted anything. Never called anyone. I just let the record become what it actually was. I got a call from Diana the evening the news broke publicly. She was calm, professional, the way she had been through all of it. Done, she said. Done, I said. We haven't spoken much since. We were allies built by circumstance, held together by a shared purpose. When the purpose resolved, we went back to our separate lives. That's not a sad thing. That's just what it was. I found a new role 4 months after I was fired, before any of the investigation became public. A smaller firm, better culture, work I respect. The industry email had done some damage, but not as much as Greg had probably hoped. People who knew me, knew me. The job I do now is quieter. Less money, for the moment. More integrity, always. And here is what I want to leave you with. There is a version of that Friday afternoon where I walk out of Harwick angry and loud and post something online and call people and fight the email publicly and spend all my energy on the noise of it. That version of me accomplishes nothing. He's emotional and reactive, and he hands Greg exactly the narrative Greg wanted. The unstable former employee with a grudge. Instead, I did one thing. I took 40 seconds on my way out the door, one email, one thread. The single piece of information I had legitimately earned and that I knew mattered. And then I was patient. The document didn't win anything on its own. Diana won it. The second whistleblower won it. The attorneys and the regulators and the process won it. But without that 40-second decision on a Friday afternoon, none of it starts. Patience is not passivity. It is the choice to let the right moment do the work that anger cannot. I think about that a lot now. About how close I came to walking out of that building empty-handed. How easy it would have been to just carry the box and leave, and spend the next year furious and powerless. Instead, I spent 40 seconds, and then I waited. And then it was over.